To make keto french fries, all you need are these two ingredients: coconut flour and something called xanthan gum. Xanthan gum is a food additive created in the 60s to enhance processed foods. Your body can't digest it. No carbs, no calories, no nutrients. Yet, this stuff is everywhere. In salad dressings, baked goods, fruit juices, soups, ice creams, sauces, gravies, syrups, gluten-free products, low-fat foods, and today, keto french fries. First thing to do is to measure out a 1/4 cup of coconut flour. Yes, you can absolutely use almond flour as a substitute here. If you were to go that route, you'd go with 1/2 cup of almond flour and then follow it with 6 tablespoons of hot water. The flavor would ultimately be very similar, though the texture would be a little more coarse. That said, I really don't like almond flour at all. I find that it just sits too heavy in my stomach, and so I avoid it whenever possible. If you're worried about these fries tasting like coconuts, don't. The same way my soft and chewy coconut flour chocolate chip cookies don't have the faintest taste of coconuts, you won't be able to taste them in these fries either. Next, we're gonna add 3 teaspoons of the aforementioned xanthan gum. I've been able to find this in the baking section at my local Walmart. Of course, you can find a link to order it down below as well. Thoroughly mix your dry ingredients, but be careful not to prematurely wet them. You'll see in a minute why. Having combined the dry ingredients, go ahead and add 8 tablespoons of hot water. Listen, that water's gotta be hot for this to work properly. And the mix will get clumpy and slimy and weird at first, but don't worry about it. That's xanthan gum for you. Just be patient and keep mixing until it forms into a nice pliable dough. Most recipes that call for xanthan gum only ever call for a pinch here and there. Just the right amount will thicken water, but too much will make it slimy. So I was surprised, to say the least, when this recipe called for 3 whole teaspoons. Now look, it's 100% worth it. These fries are delicious. And this is an important keto lesson. If you eat too much of anything that passes right through you, well, don't be surprised when it passes right through you. Again, this is a non-issue if you're mindful of your portions. I've gotten a few questions asking why I would endorse anything that's bad for you. If you're wondering the same thing, I ask that you remember that not bad isn't the same as not good. In this case, the xanthan gum is a vehicle for much needed texture, flavor, and a healthy dose of fats. Once your coconut flour xanthan gum mixture starts to actually look like dough, you can go ahead and set it down to allow it to cool. Cooling just makes it easier to work with. 10 minutes should do the trick. Once cooled, this stuff is remarkably pliable. And that's super important because you're gonna wanna flatten it as much as possible. We're gonna be cutting this dough into thin strips, and those strips are ultimately what's gonna turn into fries. Since they will expand in the fryer, the thinner you cut them, the more closely they'll resemble actual French fries. Here, I'm using my knife to shape the dough into a rectangle. If irregular cut fries are more your style, then by all means, skip this step. Now, this next part can be a little tricky, especially if you're making multiple batches of fries. The easiest method that I've come up with for separating the fries from the cutting knife is to scrape them off the cutting blade, like so. It's still tedious, but they're French fries. It's worth it. And now to fry them. This part is super easy, but there are lots of opportunities for mistakes here. First things first, your heat should be set somewhere between low and medium. Any higher and you're gonna burn your fries. And you'll know your fries are done as soon as they start turning golden brown. Now, remember when I said to let the dough cool for 10 minutes? I meant it, not a minute longer. I walked away from one of my batches, allowing it to cool for something like a half an hour. And when I fried the fries, they started popping like crazy. It didn't necessarily ruin the fries, but cooking while getting splashed by boiling oil is not exactly my idea of a good time. Keep those tips in mind, and making these fries is a breeze. Just look at them. They look perfect. If that isn't keto witchcraft, I don't know what is. When it comes to seasoning your fries, I'm a little old-fashioned. I am perfectly happy with Himalayan sea salt, but don't let that stop you from adding whatever seasoning you like. Old Bay, for instance, would make for some really good crab fries. If you want to get fancy, truffle oil and Parmesan would take this to the next level. Will you look at that? It's a bloody French fry. I know, it's crazy. I opted for sugar-free ketchup, but you can dip these bad boys in whatever condiment you like. As someone who's been in ketosis for over 2 years, this was a welcome treat that didn't kick me out of ketosis. That recipe comes courtesy of 𝗫𝗏𝗄𝗕, a YouTuber whose channel is devoted to healthier living through the vegan lifestyle. She created the recipe just a few weeks ago, and as you can imagine, it's completely taken the keto community by storm. Heavenly fan, if you're watching, thanks for sharing your recipe. As soon as I discovered how easy it is to make these fries, my imagination drifted to two regional favorites, poutine and disco fries. Poutine may well be Canada's most popular food, French fries smothered in gravy and cheese curds. No one is 100% certain where this culinary delight started, but one popular story suggests poutine was created by a creative guest in a restaurant in Quebec. Craving something rich and tasty, he suggested combining the ingredients. The restaurant entertained his request, and the rest is history. Now, if you're from New Jersey like me, you might say to yourself, fries, cheese, and gravy? That sounds a lot like disco fries. Disco fries, in case you don't know, are a staple in diners across the state of New Jersey. Traditionally a late night snack, they were always the perfect way to end a long night of partying. And yeah, they're a lot like poutine, with one crucial difference. Instead of cheese curds, we used melted mozzarella. Having had plenty of each, I can attest to them both being deliciously rich and tasty snacks. And now that we know how to make keto fries, let's make keto poutine and disco fries. The first step to making either is making the gravy. Here, I'm adding 4.5 teaspoons of unflavored beef gelatin to 2 tablespoons of cold water. This process is known as blooming the gelatin, and it creates a smoother sauce. After briefly letting it rest, I blended it with a spoon. There are several different ways to make keto gravy. Xanthan gum and arrowroot flour are two popular options. I don't want to use the former because I already used it in the fries. And I don't want to use arrowroot flour because I don't like the texture and it has too many carbs for my taste. Let's get this out of the way right now. No, gelatin will not make your gravy as creamy as those two options. But if you're on keto, I can't overstate the significance of gelatin. It's loaded with protein, it's great for skin, hair, digestion, joint pain, managing blood sugar, bone strength, sleep quality, weight loss, and more. And not for nothing, though it may not make the gravy as thick as you may like, it does add richness and depth of flavor. So personally speaking, I was very satisfied with the compromise, and I think you would be too. Next, we melt down some butter. I opted for half a stick because it felt right. For the broth, I chose organic grass-fed beef broth. While doing research on poutine, I saw that some chefs actually recommend using a combination of beef and chicken broth. If you decide to go with that option, I recommend 3/4 beef broth with 1/4 chicken broth. You could have also sauteed onions before adding the broth, but I opted not to keep the carb content low. For extra flavor, I did, however, add a cube of beef bouillon. If you don't have any beef broth on hand, beef bouillon and water would suffice. It wouldn't be as good for you, but it'll do in a pinch. When adding the beef gelatin to the beef broth, be sure the broth isn't boiling. I kept mine at a rolling simmer. Continue to mix until all of the gelatin dissolves, and you're good to go. As the gravy cools, it will continue to thicken. Again, it won't be a thick gravy, but it'll have more body than a thin broth. Also, if it cools too much, it will turn to jello. Simply reheat to reuse. With the gravy out of the way, we can add some cheese to those fries. For authentic poutine, cheese curds are clutch. I got these from Aldi. To heat them, I opted for my air fryer, but you could just as easily use your oven as well. Heating them at 350 for 3 to 4 minutes did the trick for me. Add more or less cheese according to your preferences. I mean, how can you go wrong with that? For the final step, all that's left to do is pour the gravy directly over the fries and cheese. And then get in there and mix those fries up so the gravy has a chance to saturate those fries. Canadian unspoken law demands that you use a fork to get down on these fries. Honestly, watching this video now, I would actually put a fried egg in there too. Man. Look at that comfort food. The sky is the limit with keto. I bet you could add bacon on there too, and that would be delicious. And let's be clear about something. On keto, this isn't a snack, nor is it a guilty pleasure. This meal is loaded with healthy fats, protein, and all of the health benefits of collagen. Are you gonna make this? Because you should. And you know what else you should do? You should absolutely subscribe to Keto Crush and maybe even recommend me to a friend. Sharing is caring after all. Speaking of, I have one more recipe to share, and that's our disco fries. There's really not much to this one. Once you've mastered the gravy, the only difference, again, is the cheese that you use. This Go fries calls for melted mozzarella. You'll want to use low moisture shredded mozzarella for that nice stringy texture. Like the poutine, I opted to use an air fryer to melt the mozzarella. But if you wanted to, you could also throw the mozzarella in the gravy and melt it over the stovetop or in a microwave. It doesn't matter how you do it, so long as that cheese is melted. You could actually throw some tomato sauce on here for pizza fries. So many options. The rest of the recipe follows exactly how poutine did. Throw in the gravy, mix it up, and let it soak into those fries. At this point, I've already had more than my fair share of fries, so I went ahead and asked my son to give it a try. He was only a little camera shy, but he assured me he enjoyed them. And I believed him because he snuck into the fridge later on and ended up eating the rest. My kids may not be keto, but they know good food when they taste it. There are so many things you can do with this recipe for keto fries. I've got a few more in mind that I'd like to do down the road. What are some of your favorite ways to eat French fries? Tell me so I can try them. Thank you for watching Keto Crush, your channel for eating healthy, feeling great, and looking hot. See you in the next video.